Here is something your doctor may not have told you yet. After the age of 60, your brain loses about 0.5% of its volume every single year. 0.5%. That doesn't sound like much until you do the math over a decade. But here's what makes this even more important. Researchers now know that the rate of that decline is not fixed. It's not just genetics. It's not just luck. A significant part of it is driven by what you eat. In this video, I'm going to give you 2 lists. 5 foods that are actively protecting your brain right now, slowing that decline, reducing inflammation, even helping clear some of the toxic proteins that are linked to Alzheimer's disease. And 5 foods that are doing the opposite. Foods that are accelerating brain aging, disrupting memory, and in some cases, shrinking the part of your brain responsible for forming new memories. Now, I'll warn you, at least one food on the harmful list is probably in your kitchen right now. Maybe even something you eat every day thinking it's fine, or even healthy. Stay with me through both lists, because the second half of this video is just as important as the first. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim. Welcome back to Senior Health Review, where we focus specifically on how the science of aging applies to you, not just to people in general. Let's get into it. Before we get to the food list, I want to spend 2 minutes on something that makes all of this more meaningful. Because you might be wondering, why does it matter what I eat specifically at 60? Aren't these just general healthy eating tips? No, and here's why. 3 significant things happen to your brain as you move past 60 that change the equation completely. First, cerebral blood flow slows down. By the time you reach your 70s, blood flow to the brain has decreased by roughly 20% compared to your 40s. That means less oxygen, fewer nutrients reaching your neurons, and slower clearance of waste products that accumulate in brain tissue. Second, the blood-brain barrier becomes more permeable. This is a protective layer that normally filters what gets into your brain from your bloodstream. In younger people, it's tight. After 60, it becomes more porous, which means inflammatory compounds, harmful molecules, and even certain food byproducts can get into brain tissue that they never could before. Third, myelin repair slows. Myelin is the insulating sheath around your nerve fibers that allows signals to travel quickly and cleanly. Keeping myelin healthy requires specific nutrients, and after 60, the body's ability to synthesize and repair it naturally starts to decline. Put those 3 things together, and you have a brain that is significantly more vulnerable to the wrong foods, and significantly more responsive to the right ones than it was 20 or 30 years ago. As I like to tell my patients, what your brain could tolerate at 40, it simply cannot afford at 65. That's not a reason to feel anxious. It's a reason to pay attention. And that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, let's start with the good news. 5 foods that the research consistently shows are protective for the aging brain. Number 1 on our list, and honestly, if I had to pick just one food for brain health after 60, this would be it, is fatty fish. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring. These are the ones I'm talking about. The key compounds here are DHA and EPA, 2 forms of omega-3 fatty acids. You've probably heard about omega-3s in a general health context, but I want to explain specifically what they do inside your aging brain. DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is actually a structural component of your brain cells. It's literally built into the membranes of your neurons. It makes those membranes more fluid, more flexible, and better at receiving and transmitting signals. Here's the aging-specific piece. As you get older, your body becomes less efficient at converting plant-based omega-3s, the kind found in flaxseed, for example, into DHA, which means if you're relying on plant sources alone, you may not be getting enough of the form your brain actually uses. Preformed DHA from fatty fish bypasses that conversion problem entirely. EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, plays a different but equally important role. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory, and chronic low-grade inflammation in the brain, what researchers sometimes call neuroinflammation, is now considered one of the primary drivers of age-related cognitive decline. Multiple large studies have found that older adults with higher blood levels of DHA and EPA score significantly better on memory tests, processing speed, and verbal fluency. The practical guidance here is straightforward. Aim for at least 2 servings of fatty fish per week. A serving is about 3 to 4 ounces, roughly the size of your palm. If you don't enjoy fish or can't access it regularly, a high-quality fish oil supplement standardized to at least 1 gram of combined DHA and EPA is a reasonable alternative, but talk to your doctor first, particularly if you're on blood thinners. Canned sardines and canned salmon, by the way, are nutritionally excellent and much more affordable than fresh fish. Don't overlook them. Number 2 is blueberries. And before you think, oh, everyone says blueberries are healthy, let me tell you why they're specifically remarkable for the aging brain in a way that's distinct from almost any other fruit. The key compounds in blueberries are called anthocyanins. These are the pigments that give blueberries their deep blue-purple color, and they happen to be one of the very few dietary compounds that can cross the blood-brain barrier directly. Remember what I said earlier about that barrier becoming more permeable after 60? In this case, we can actually use that change to our advantage. Anthocyanins get into brain tissue and go to work. What do they do once they're there? Several things. They neutralize free radicals, the unstable molecules that cause oxidative stress and damage neurons over time. They reduce neuroinflammation, and, this is the part I find particularly compelling, they appear to improve communication between neurons by increasing what's called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form and strengthen connections. A landmark study from Harvard tracked over 16,000 women over 70 and found that those who ate the most blueberries showed the slowest rates of cognitive aging, equivalent to delaying cognitive decline by up to 2.5 years. For practical use, half a cup per day is the amount most frequently cited in research. Frozen blueberries are just as effective as fresh, sometimes more so, because they're frozen at peak ripeness and retain more anthocyanins than berries that have been sitting in storage. Stock your freezer. Throw them into oatmeal, a smoothie, or just eat them as a snack. Number 3 is extra virgin olive oil, and this one has a very specific, very exciting mechanism that I think more people should know about. The key compound here is called oleocanthal. It's a natural phenolic compound found in high-quality extra virgin olive oil, and it has a remarkable property that researchers are now studying intensely in the context of Alzheimer's disease. Oleocanthal helps activate and enhance the brain's waste clearance system, and specifically, it appears to help clear amyloid beta proteins. These are the misfolded proteins that accumulate in the brain and form the plaques that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. This isn't a cure. I want to be absolutely clear about that. But the research suggests that regular consumption of extra virgin olive oil may slow the accumulation of these toxic proteins, and that's significant. There's also the anti-inflammatory angle. Extra virgin olive oil is rich in polyphenols that suppress inflammatory pathways throughout the body, including in the brain. And because chronic neuroinflammation is so closely tied to cognitive decline after 60, that effect alone makes olive oil worth prioritizing. One important note, not all olive oil is equal. You need extra virgin, cold-pressed, unrefined. Regular olive oil or light olive oil has had most of these beneficial compounds removed through processing. Look for bottles that give you a harvest date and a country of origin. Darker glass is better. It protects the polyphenols from light degradation. Use it as your primary cooking fat. Drizzle it on salads, on roasted vegetables, on fish. 2 to 4 tablespoons per day is the range most studies use. And don't be afraid of the fat content. For your brain, this is exactly the kind of fat it needs. Now I'm going to get to brain foods 4 and 5 in just a moment, but I need to pause here and tell you something. The number one food on our harmful list, the one I said might already be in your kitchen, I want you to be thinking about that as we finish this first half. Because when we get there, you're going to understand exactly why it's so damaging for the brain after 60, in a way that might genuinely surprise you. Brain foods 4 and 5. Let's keep going. Number 4 is walnuts, and I love mentioning to patients that walnuts literally look like a small brain. It's one of those odd coincidences of nature, but in this case, the appearance actually tracks with the function. Walnuts are uniquely dense in 3 things that matter for cognitive health: ALA, the plant-based form of omega-3, vitamin E, and polyphenols. Now, I mentioned earlier that ALA is not as efficiently converted to DHA as fish-derived omega-3. That's still true, but walnuts don't rely on that conversion alone. They bring polyphenols and vitamin E to the table as well. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects the fatty membranes of neurons from oxidative damage, and the brain, being about 60% fat by dry weight, is particularly dependent on fat-soluble antioxidants for protection. The polyphenol content in walnuts has been shown to reduce neuroinflammation and improve the signaling between brain cells. Here's what makes walnuts especially compelling, specifically for older adults. Several clinical trials have focused on adults over 60 as their study population, and they found measurable improvements in memory, cognitive processing speed, and mental flexibility after regular walnut consumption. 1 ounce per day, that's roughly a small handful, about 7 to 8 whole walnuts. That's the amount used in most of the research. They make an excellent snack on their own, or you can chop them and add to oatmeal, salads, or yogurt. Number 5, and I want to emphasize the word whole, is eggs. The entire egg, yolk included. Eggs fell out of favor for a long time because of concerns about dietary cholesterol. The science on that has shifted considerably, and for most adults over 60, without specific contraindications, whole eggs are an exceptional brain food. Here's why. 2 compounds, choline and lutein. Choline is a nutrient that many Americans don't get nearly enough of, and after 60, the problem becomes more acute. Here's the mechanism. Choline is the direct precursor to acetylcholine, one of the most important neurotransmitters for memory and learning. When acetylcholine levels drop, memory function declines. Now, your body can synthesize some choline on its own, but that synthetic capacity decreases with age, which means dietary choline becomes increasingly important the older you get. Eggs are one of the richest dietary sources of choline available. Lutein is a carotenoid most often associated with eye health, but it's also found in measurable concentrations in brain tissue, particularly in areas associated with visual processing and cognitive function. Research has found that higher brain lutein levels correlate with better cognitive performance in older adults. Practical guidance. 2 whole eggs per day is reasonable for most healthy seniors. If you have specific cholesterol concerns or a history of cardiovascular disease, talk with your doctor about the right amount for your situation. But don't reflexively remove the yolk. That's where virtually all the choline and lutein are. Alright, now we turn to the second half of the list, and this is the one that I think carries the most urgency. Because most people on the harmful list don't know these foods are specifically problematic for the aging brain. Some of them have been marketed as harmless. A couple have even been framed as healthy. Let's go through them one by one. Number 1 on the harmful list, and this is the one I promised you, is ultra-processed snack foods. Chips, crackers, packaged cookies, cheese puffs. The things you reach for when you want something crunchy and satisfying between meals. Two mechanisms are at work here, and both are worse for people over 60 than for any other age group. The first is advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are compounds that form when sugars react with proteins or fats at high temperatures, which is exactly what happens during the high heat processing and frying used to make most packaged snack foods. When you consume AGEs, they contribute to a process called glycation in your body's own tissues, including in the brain. Over time, glycated proteins accumulate and interfere with normal cell function. They drive inflammation, and they appear to accelerate the very kind of protein aggregation, the clumping of toxic proteins that we see in neurodegenerative disease. Here's the age-specific piece. Younger bodies are reasonably efficient at clearing AGEs. After 60, that clearance system slows considerably. So the same bag of chips that your 35-year-old self might have metabolized without significant long-term consequence is now leaving a higher residue of harmful compounds in your tissue, including your brain tissue. The second mechanism is the combination of trans fats and refined industrial seed oils used in most of these products. These disrupt the omega-3 to omega-6 balance in your cell membranes, including your neurons, promoting inflammation at the cellular level. What to do instead? When you want something crunchy and satisfying, reach for a small handful of walnuts or almonds, some cut vegetables with hummus, or an apple with a tablespoon of nut butter. The crunch instinct is real. You don't have to fight it. Just redirect it. Number 2 is sugary drinks, sodas, sweetened iced teas, commercial fruit juices, yes, even the ones that say 100% juice on the label. The primary concern here is fructose, the form of sugar that makes sweet drinks taste sweet, and what chronic high fructose intake does to the brain over time. You're probably familiar with insulin resistance in the context of blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. But there is a growing body of research describing what some neurologists are now calling type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance that develops in the brain itself. Here's the mechanism. Your brain uses glucose as its primary fuel. To use it properly, insulin needs to work correctly in brain tissue. When you repeatedly flood your bloodstream with high amounts of fructose from sugary drinks, it triggers a cascade that eventually impairs insulin signaling in the brain. The brain's neurons stop responding to insulin properly, and their ability to use glucose for energy becomes compromised. The result is brain cells that are essentially starving for energy even when glucose is available. And this process has been directly linked in emerging research to the development of amyloid plaques and the progression of Alzheimer's-related pathology. After 60, glucose metabolism in the brain is already naturally less efficient than it was in younger years. Adding chronic fructose-driven insulin resistance on top of that is, in my view, one of the most underappreciated threats to cognitive health in older adults. The swap here is not complicated, it's just a habit. Sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon, unsweetened herbal tea, black coffee in moderation, water with fresh mint or cucumber. None of these require sacrifice once the habit is established. Number 3 is margarine and vegetable spreads, particularly the older formulations, but also many modern ones that still use partially hydrogenated oils or high amounts of industrial seed oils like soybean, corn, or safflower. I want to be nuanced here because some newer plant-based spreads have improved formulations, but many products in this category are still problematic, and here's why. The main issue is the dramatic imbalance in omega-6 fatty acids these products introduce. A healthy omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in your diet should be somewhere around 1 to 4 at the most. The typical American diet, heavily influenced by margarine, packaged foods, and vegetable oils, pushes that ratio to 1 to 20 or even 1 to 30. This chronic excess of omega-6 relative to omega-3 drives a systemic inflammatory state, including in the brain. And after 60, when neuroinflammation is already an elevated concern due to age-related changes in immune regulation, this imbalance becomes even more damaging. What should you use instead? This is where extra virgin olive oil becomes your best friend. For cooking at moderate heat, olive oil is excellent. For baking, small amounts of grass-fed butter provide fat-soluble vitamins including K, 2, and A without the inflammatory seed oil load. For spreading on bread or toast, a thin layer of real butter is a better choice than most margarines. Turn the margarine tub around and look at the ingredients. If you see partially hydrogenated anything, or if the first oils listed are soybean, corn, or cottonseed, put it back. Number 4 is white bread and refined carbohydrates broadly, white rice, regular pasta, and anything made primarily from refined white flour. I want to be clear, carbohydrates are not inherently harmful. The type and speed of carbohydrate matters enormously. The problem with refined carbs is their glycemic impact, how quickly they raise blood glucose, and what that rapid spike does to the aging brain. When blood sugar spikes rapidly, glucose molecules begin to attach to proteins in a process called glycation, the same underlying mechanism we discussed with AGEs in the snack food category. In the brain, glycated proteins accumulate and impair the normal signaling between neurons. Over time, they contribute to structural damage in brain tissue. Here's the age-specific concern. After 60, glucose metabolism in the brain naturally slows. The brain becomes somewhat less efficient at processing glucose. When you combine that natural inefficiency with the rapid, high-amplitude blood sugar swings that come from white bread and refined carbs, you're creating a larger metabolic insult with less capacity to recover from it than you would have experienced at 40. There's also the insulin story again. Repeated glycemic spikes contribute to peripheral insulin resistance, which over time can impair the insulin signaling that the brain relies on for energy metabolism. The swap isn't about eliminating carbohydrates, it's about choosing slower ones. Sourdough bread, where fermentation partially breaks down the starches and lowers the glycemic impact. Steel-cut oats, sweet potatoes, quinoa, brown rice, legumes. These give you the fuel without the spike. Number 5 on the harmful list is alcohol. And I want to address this one carefully because I know it's a sensitive subject for many people. Alcohol is woven into social life, into celebration, into dinner with family. I'm not here to lecture anyone, but I do need to tell you what the science shows. And the picture for older adults is not the one many of us grew up believing. For years, moderate drinking, typically defined as 1 drink per day for women, up to 2 for men, was considered acceptable or even mildly protective for heart health. More recent and more rigorous research has significantly challenged that view. Here's the brain-specific concern. Alcohol is neurotoxic. Even in moderate amounts, regular alcohol consumption has been consistently associated with shrinkage of the hippocampus, the region of the brain most critical for forming new memories. This is the part of the brain that is damaged earliest and most severely in Alzheimer's disease. Multiple large studies, including a significant Oxford University study of over 500 adults, found that even moderate drinkers showed greater hippocampal atrophy than non-drinkers over time. And here's the aging-specific piece that I think matters most. Hippocampal shrinkage accelerates after age 65. The brain's capacity to compensate for alcohol-related damage diminishes, and the liver's ability to metabolize alcohol efficiently also declines with age, meaning the same amount of alcohol produces a higher blood alcohol concentration in a 70-year-old than it did in a 40-year-old. As of the most recent research I'm aware of, there is no established safe threshold for alcohol consumption, specifically in older adults, when it comes to brain health. The guidance that I give patients over 60 is, if you drink, less is better. And if you don't drink, there is no brain health reason to start. If you currently enjoy a glass of wine with dinner, and this is something you want to think through with your own physician, please do. This is a conversation worth having. I know that was hard to hear, but you deserve the truth. Alright, let's bring this together practically. Because I don't want you to leave this video with a list of do's and don'ts and no idea what to actually do with it, let me show you what a brain protective day might look like using what we've covered today. In the morning, 2 scrambled whole eggs cooked in a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil, a half cup of blueberries, frozen is fine, just thaw them overnight, on the side or mixed into steel-cut oatmeal, black coffee or unsweetened herbal tea. You've just gotten your choline, your lutein, your anthocyanins, your olive oil polyphenols, and a slow-releasing complex carbohydrate. And you've replaced what might have been a bowl of sweetened cereal or white toast and juice. For lunch, a simple salad with a palm-sized portion of canned salmon or canned sardines, dressed with extra virgin olive oil and lemon. A small handful of walnuts on top. Omega-3s, more olive oil, more walnuts, more polyphenols, protein that will keep blood sugar steady through the afternoon, reducing the craving for a sugary snack at 3 o'clock. For dinner, a piece of baked or pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables drizzled with, yes, more olive oil, a side of sweet potato, or a serving of brown rice. You've just hit nearly every item on the good list, and you haven't had to do anything complicated. And the swaps for the harmful list are just as simple. Chips calling your name, small handful of walnuts. Soda or sweet tea, sparkling water with lemon. Margarine, olive oil, or a thin layer of real butter. White bread, sourdough, or oats. Evening glass of wine, consider sparkling water or herbal tea at least some nights. None of this has to be all or nothing. Perfection is not the goal. Consistency is the goal. Small changes compounded over months and years is how you move the needle on brain health, at any age, but especially after 60. Now you know exactly which 5 foods are working for your brain after 60 and which 5 are working against it. Fatty fish, blueberries, extra virgin olive oil, walnuts, whole eggs. These are your allies. Ultra-processed snacks, sugary drinks, margarine, white bread and refined carbs, and alcohol. These are what I'd ask you to reconsider, or at least reduce. And here's what I want you to hold on to. It is not too late. The research is genuinely clear on this point. Dietary changes made after 60 do slow cognitive decline. They do reduce neuroinflammation. They do support the brain's ability to maintain connections and clear toxic buildup, even when those changes start later in life. Your brain is not a fixed system that's been set on a track. It responds to what you feed it, every single day. If this video gave you one or two things to change this week, that's a win. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one food from the good list to add. Pick one from the harmful list to reduce. Start there. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more seniors who can benefit from this kind of information. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because next week, I'm covering the single most underrated nutrient for memory that studies show most Americans over 60 are severely deficient in, and most people have never even heard of it in this context. You don't want to miss that one. Until then, take care of that brain. It's taking care of you. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim. I'll see you in the next video.